So week 24 of the fantasy baseball season here, and it's a championship for most fantasy owners. We're playing for your third place game, obviously, this week. So here's a few hitters I look to add this week, and they definitely can help your fantasy team in a pinch here. The first guy, Rodolfo Castro of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Obviously, the Pirates, one of the worst teams in the league, and they're playing all the young guys and seeing what they got for the future. And Castro, he's been a hot pickup, added in 12% of fantasy leagues over the last week here on the season. 10 home runs, 21 RBIs, 19 runs scored, 5 stolen bases, a 244 average, and a 303 on base percentage. But the last few weeks here, he's been showing some pop. 5 home runs, 11 RBIs, 7 runs scored, a stolen base, a 232 average, and a 283 on base. So his versatility is great as well, qualifying at second, third, and shortstop here is Castro on the season. So right now, the last few games here for him: September 12th at the Reds, 1 for 4, a homer, 3 RBI. September 13th in a doubleheader at the Reds, 2 for 8 with a run. September 14th at the Reds, 2 for 5, a homer, 4 RBIs, 2 runs scored. September 15th at the Mets, 0 for 4. September 16th at the Mets, 1 for 4. September 17th at the Mets, 3 for 4 with a homer in that one. And September 18th at the Mets, 0 for 4. So right now, Castro batting third in this Pirate lineup, and he's going nowhere. And like I said, they got to see what they have with these young guys, and his versatility is great, playing second, third, and shortstop. Not the greatest of positions in fantasy baseball. So right now, available in tons of fantasy leagues here is Castro at 86%, and fantasy owners should definitely go out there and get him this week. The next guy, Oscar Gonzalez of the Cleveland Guardians. I mentioned Gonzalez last week as an ad, and he was added in tons of leagues at 35%, but still out there in 58% of leagues. On the season, 9 home runs, 36 RBIs, 27 runs scored, a stolen base, 299 average, and a 332 on base. But over the last couple weeks here, he's been red hot and one of the best players in fantasy baseball in the time. 4 home runs, 13 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 379 average, and a 438 on base. So amazing numbers here for Oscar Gonzalez. Obviously, I don't see you keeping up the remainder of the season, but right now, he definitely can help owners here at the outfield with utility spot. September 13th versus the Angels, 2 for 4, a homer, 2 ribs. September 14th versus the Angels, 3 for 4 with a homer. September 15th versus the White Sox, 1 for 4. September 16th versus Minnesota, 2 for 4. September 17th in a doubleheader versus the Twins, 3 for 11 with a run and a rib. And September 18th versus Minnesota, 0 for 4. So if you need some batting average, some RBIs, and a little pop here, Gonzalez is definitely a good ad this week, and a guy that definitely can help owners right now. The next guy is Gunnar Henderson of the Baltimore Orioles. So Henderson, one of the top prospects to come up this season here in baseball, and obviously the Baltimore Oriole system on the season. 2 home runs, 12 RBIs, 7 runs scored, a stolen base, 345 average, and a 387 on base. And over the last couple weeks here, he's held his own as well. 1 home run, 11 RBIs, 5 runs scored, a 326 average, and a 370 on base. Henderson available in 50% of fantasy leagues here. And he's a 5-2 player. And obviously, it's only been about a month he's been up now. You're not going to see everything right away here from Henderson, but we've seen flashes, and we see the potential with him, no doubt about it. September 11th versus Boston, 0 for 1. September 13th at the Nats, 2 for 5 with a run and a rib. September 14th at the Nats, 2 for 4, run, 4 RBI. September 16th at the Blue Jays, 2 for 4, a homer in that one. September 17th at Toronto, 2 for 4, run and 2 RBIs. And September 18th at Toronto, 0 for 3. So right now, they got a good series coming up, is Baltimore versus a weak pitching staff in the Detroit Tigers. And right here, Henderson, like I said, shortstop's a weak position in fantasy baseball. But obviously, if you made it this far into the season here in your championship or a third place game, you might not need a shortstop. But right now, Henderson's definitely a guy I look to get on my wire this week. The next guy is Elvis Andrus of the Chicago White Sox. I mentioned him last week as a big pickup as Andrus, and once again, he's staying hot, and he was added in 25% of fantasy leagues over the last week, but right now still available in 47% of leagues. On the season, 14 home runs, 51 RBIs, 12 stolen bases, 59 runs scored, a 256 average, and a 314 on base. So right here, what a resurgence season it's been here for Andrus on the White Sox. And over the last few weeks here for him, 4 home runs, 10 RBIs, 11 runs scored, 4 stolen bases, a 357 average, and a 400 on base. So right here, this guy, he's been white hot, and he's come out of nowhere, like I mentioned this year. after the last few seasons, he's pretty much not been existent for fantasy baseball. So the last few games here for Andrews: September 13th versus the Rockies, 2 for 3 with a run. September 14th versus the Rockies, 2 for 4 with a stolen base. September 15th at the Guardians, 1 for 5 with a homer in that one. September 16th at Detroit, 3 for 5, a run, a stolen base. September 17th at Detroit, 1 for 5 with a run, a stolen base. And September 18th at Detroit, 1 for 4 with a run and a stolen base. And right here, he's a good base stealer. We always knew that about Andrews. But obviously now the power he's been showing over the last few weeks and getting an everyday opportunity with this White Sox team, batting leadoff. And he's making the most of it, and he's definitely a guy that should be on more fantasy teams here, especially this late in the season where every stolen base counts and the batting average that high in the last few weeks is a big thing as well. The next guy, Gio Urshela of the Minnesota Twins. So Gio Urshela, he was obviously in the Donaldson trade coming from the Yankees over here to the Twins, and it's been a pretty decent year for him. 12 home runs, 57 RBIs, 51 runs scored, a stolen base, a 277 average, and a 325 on base here. So Gio Urshela, always a good professional, and he's always a guy that'll give you a good at-bat, but he's had some fantasy value over the last few weeks here, hitting 352 with a homer, 4 RBIs, a stolen base, and 6 runs scored. So right now, that batting average is up, that on-base percentage over 500 in the last couple weeks as well, and he's available right now in tons of fantasy leagues. In 64% of leagues here is Gio Urshela. So the last few games here for him: September 11th versus the Guardians, 1 for 4. September 13th versus the Royals, 3 for 3 with a homer. September 14th versus Kansas City, 0 for 1, a run and a rib. September 15th versus Kansas City, 2 for 4. September 16th at the Guardians, 1 for 4 with a run. September 17th in a doubleheader at the Guardians, 4 for 9 with a run, 2 RBIs. And September 18th at the Guardians, 0 for 3. So right here, playing good baseball is Urshela, a guy who qualifies at third and short. And we know short's a weak position, but this week here, a lot of good guys coming up at the shortstop position on the waiver wire. And right here, he's definitely a guy we'll go out there and get. The next hitter is William Contreras of the Atlanta Braves. So probably out of the 24 weeks I've done these videos, I've mentioned William Contreras at least 7 or 8 times, I would think, here throughout the season. And he's having a great year with this Brave team, and he's been not the starter the whole season, and times he's only DH part-time as well. So right here, only a 3-4 time player a week for the most part he's won, but now he's been playing every day over the last few weeks. On the season here for Contreras, 18 home runs, 40 RBIs, 44 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 278 batting average, and a 348 on base. But over the last couple weeks here, he's been hot as a firecracker. 1 home run, 3 RBIs, 4 runs scored, a 368 average, and a 409 on base. So right here, playing great baseball is William Contreras. Obviously qualifies at probably the weakest position in fantasy baseball, playing catcher, and he pretty much plays every day as well. September 11th at Seattle, 1 for 4. September 12th at the Giants, 0 for 1. September 14th at the Giants, 2 for 4. September 16th versus Philly, 3 for 4, a homer, 2 RBI. September 17th versus Philly, 1 for 4 with a run. And September 18th versus Philly, 1 for 4 with a homer. So right here, they completed the sweep in that one versus the Philadelphia Phillies, with his Atlanta Brave team. And it's a pennant race for the NL East here. And William Contreras has definitely been a big part of it, and he's definitely a guy hitting the baseball well, and a guy should be owned in more than 59% of leagues, out there in 41%, and pick him up this week if somehow he's still out there in your fantasy league. The next guy is Tony Kemp of the Oakland Athletics. Tony Kemp, another speed guy, and a guy that gets the everyday opportunity, batting leadoff for this Oakland team. On the season, 6 home runs, 40 RBIs, 55 runs scored, 10 stolen bases, a 235 average, and a 311 on base. But over the last few weeks here, 2 homers, 6 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 12 runs scored, a 333 average, and a 429 on base. If you're looking for some stolen bases and runs scored, Kemp will definitely do that for fantasy owners. He's out there in 91% of fantasy leagues and qualifies at second in outfield. So the last few games here for him: September 11th versus Chicago, big ball game versus the White Sox, 3 for 4, 4 runs, a homer, 3 RBIs. September 14th at Texas, 1 for 3, a homer, 2 ribs. September 15th at Houston, 0 for 4. September 16th at Houston, 0 for 3. September 17th at Houston, 3 for 5, 3 runs, 2 stolen bases. And September 18th at Houston, 1 for 4 with a run. So right here, like I said, stolen bases and runs, and now batting average over the last few weeks. He's definitely a guy to go out there and get on the wire this week. The next guy's Albert Pujols of the St. Louis Cardinals. So Pujols closing in on history here. 2 home runs shy of 700. And he's been on a tear as Pujols over the last month of the season. On the season, 19 home runs, 53 RBIs, 32 runs scored, a stolen base, 260 average, and a 337 on base. So this guy could still go out there and put up numbers and play good baseball. And over the last month, like I mentioned, 8 home runs, 18 RBIs, 9 runs scored, a 266 average, and a 341 on base. So Albert right now, obviously he's got that big home run swing going. He wants to get to 700, and he's got about, I think, 12, 15 games range left before he could do it. But right now he's getting the everyday chance, and he's producing for the most part. September 13th versus the Brewers, 1 for 4 with a rib. September 14th versus the Brewers for Albert, 1 for 3 with a rib. September 15th versus the Reds, 0 for 3 with an RBI. September 16th versus Cincinnati, 1 for 3, a homer, 2 ribs. September 17th versus the Reds, 0 for 4. And September 18th versus the Reds, 0 for 4. So right here, they go to San Diego, but they got a day off coming up here. And like I said, Pujols out there in 62% of fantasy leagues. He's showing power. He's being productive. And if you need a utility hitter or a first baseman, I would go out there and get Pujols this week. The next guy, Seth Brown for the Oakland Athletics. So Brown, he's pretty much been a power guy and nothing this season. But sometimes it's good to just have those type of guys on your roster. On the season, 23 homers, 62 RBIs. 48 runs scored, 8 stolen bases, a 233 average, and a 301 on base. But over the last few weeks here, he's found the average on the on base, and he's been one of the best players in fantasy baseball in that time. 6 home runs, 11 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 341 average, and a 426 on base. And he's available in 72% of leagues as Brown. So the last few games here for him, September 11th versus the White Sox, 2 for 5 with an RBI. September 14th at Texas, 1 for 5. A homer, 2 RBI. September 15th at Houston, 0 for 1. September 16th at Houston, 0 for 2. September 17th at Houston, 2 for 4. A homer, 4 ribs. And September 18th at Houston, 0 for 4. So right here, if you need some power and RBIs this week here, he's definitely a player I would go out there and get, is Seth Brown. And he's available, like I said, in 72% of fantasy leagues. And the final hitter I look to add here, Isaiah Kiner-Fowler of the New York Yankees. So for Fowler, he's been playing good baseball of late here, and he's getting the everyday opportunity, obviously, for this Yankee team. And that's what they want to see from him. The season, 3 home runs, 46 RBIs, 20 stolen bases, 63 runs scored, a 268 average, and a 320 on base. But over the last 2 weeks here, 2 homers, 8 RBIs, 5 stolen bases, 9 runs scored, a 333 average, and a 422 on base. So right now available in 73% of fantasy leagues. And if you need runs scored and stolen bases and some average for a guy that qualifies at shortstop, this would be the time to go get him right now. So the last few games here for him, September 10th versus Tampa, 2 for 4 with a rib. September 11th versus Tampa, 0 for 2 with a run. September 13th at the Red Sox, 1 for 4 with 2 runs. September 14th at Boston, 1 for 3 with a run, 2 stolen bases. And September 16th at Milwaukee, 1 for 3 with a rib. And September 18th at Milwaukee, 1 for 5 with a run. So right here, playing good baseball. Yankees need all the defense and manufacturing runs they could as well here. And Kiner-Fowler is definitely doing that. So right here, that's a few hitters I'd look to pick up here in a big week 24 for most fantasy owners with championships or semifinals or third place games. Whatever the case may be, it's a big week here, and we'll see what these guys could do. So that's a few hitters I look to add in week 24 of the fantasy baseball season.